The year 1999 brought an unusually warm autumn to New York City. The golden September sun bathed the tops of Manhattan's towering skyscrapers as Liam Davenport first laid eyes on her. She was a slender woman in a sharp business suit, her brown skin glowing under the sunlight. Juggling a dictaphone in one hand and a precarious stack of documents in the other, she struggled to push through the heavy revolving doors of a high-rise business center. Dahlia Sloan was late for the most important interview of her career. As an ambitious financial journalist, she had finally secured a one-on-one with a rising star of the investment world, an opportunity she couldn't afford to waste. But fate had other plans. A sudden gust of wind sent her carefully arranged papers flying across the marble lobby. As she scrambled to collect them, a pair of strong hands reached down to help. When she looked up, she met a warm, steady gaze, gray eyes full of quiet confidence. His dark hair was tousled in a way that seemed effortlessly stylish, and his tailored designer suit bore a polished name tag. Liam Davenport, CEO. Their first meeting lasted far longer than planned. What was meant to be a routine business interview stretched into 3 hours of easy conversation, laughter, and shared insights. Dahlia not only walked away with an in-depth feature on the rapid rise of an investment firm, but also with an unexpected invitation to dinner. Liam spoke of finance with an infectious passion, transforming complex economic principles into something almost poetic. He recounted how, 5 years earlier, he had met Gregory Frost, an experienced broker who had recognized his potential and guided him into the world of high-stakes investing. Frost, though technically just a consultant, had become much more, a mentor, a trusted advisor, even a father figure. Trust and reputation, Frost often reminded him, are the most valuable currencies in business. Dahlia and Liam's romance unfolded as if scripted for a perfect love story. They were an ideal match. Her tenacity and sharp instincts complemented his strategic mind and business acumen. As her financial articles gained recognition, she found herself drawn deeper into the world of Wall Street. Liam, in turn, marveled at her ability to simplify the most intricate market trends into compelling narratives. Within 3 months, they were married. The ceremony was intimate, attended by only 20 close friends in a historic mansion on the outskirts of the city. Gregory Frost stood by Liam's side, not just as a business partner, but as family. Their honeymoon was a whirlwind tour of Europe, Paris, Vienna, Venice. Liam adored his wife, and Dahlia basked in the luxury of their new life together. Upon returning to New York, they moved into a sleek penthouse overlooking Central Park. Liam's business flourished. His instincts for promising ventures seemed almost prophetic. Dahlia left her magazine job to work on a book about modern investment trends. They were the golden couple, young, successful, deeply in love. Evenings were spent on their terrace, sipping wine under the city lights. Liam would discuss expansion plans while Dahlia shared progress on her book. Gregory Frost was a frequent guest, his presence a constant thread in their lives. Discussions stretched late into the night, filled with market forecasts and investment strategies. It seemed as if nothing could shatter the future they were building. But beneath the veneer of their perfect life, cracks had already begun to form. Liam failed to notice the subtle shift in Dahlia's gaze when she attended exclusive investor meetings. He missed the way she lingered a little too long on discussions about financial loopholes and corporate power plays. He dismissed her increasing curiosity about his company's internal affairs. Blinded by love, he never questioned her loyalty. The betrayal. Dark velvet curtains dimmed the lighting in the Empire restaurant, casting a warm, intimate glow over the polished mahogany tables. Dahlia traced the rim of her martini glass with a thoughtful finger, her eyes studying the man across from her. Emmett Rutledge was the epitome of control. His tailored suit hugged his frame with effortless precision, his graying temples only adding to his air of distinction. There was something magnetic about him, the way his dark eyes flickered with amusement, the smoothness of his husky British accented voice. "You do realize your husband is nothing more than a lucky upstart, don't you?" His words were deliberate, each syllable coated in quiet disdain. Dahlia's lips curled slightly, a shadow of a smile. She had once been captivated by Liam's raw ambition, his unrelenting drive. But now, after meeting Rutledge, those qualities seemed amateur. Next to this man, who exuded power, who was power, Liam appeared almost naive. Gregory Frost gave him a chance. Rutledge continued smoothly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. And what do we have? A boy who fancies himself a financial genius. Dahlia tilted her head, considering. 6 months ago, she had admired Liam. Now he seemed small, predictable, weak. Rutledge leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. I'm offering you a future, my dear. A real future. Not a life wasted in the shadow of a shallow husband. His hand covered hers, warm, firm. We only need to remove the unnecessary pieces from the board. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. Frost knew too much, suspected too much. He had begun asking questions about financial discrepancies, questions that, if answered, could unravel everything. Rutledge laid it all out in perfect detail. The forged documents, the planted evidence, the staged threats. A gun would be found in Liam's office. Witnesses would testify to his growing hostility toward Frost. And then, there was the most vital piece, the one only Dahlia could provide. Her testimony. A grieving widow, torn between loyalty to her husband and the undeniable evidence before her. A woman reluctantly forced to reveal his erratic behavior, his escalating paranoia, his veiled threats against his mentor. It was the perfect betrayal. That night, as the sound of gunfire echoed through the city, Dahlia sat in the darkness of their penthouse, rehearsing the words she would say. Her voice would tremble at just the right moments. Her sorrow would appear genuine. She had memorized the script flawlessly. And by morning, Liam Davenport would no longer be a rising star. He would be the prime suspect in a murder that would shake Wall Street to its core. Liam had indeed stopped by Frost's place. She'd made sure the cameras caught it herself. The prosecutor's voice tingled with triumph as he addressed the court. Dahlia, crying on the witness stand, spoke of love, disappointment, and disbelief over what had happened. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Liam's frozen face. Dahlia, look at me. Liam's voice sounded muffled. Look me in the eyes and tell me you believe I'm guilty. She looked up and met his gaze. His gray eyes held pure, unadulterated pain, the pain of a betrayed man. That look would haunt her nightmares. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the sentence. 25 years in prison. Liam said nothing, only staring long and hard, as if trying to solve a riddle. Outside the courthouse, Rutledge was waiting. Congratulations, darling. You were great. His kiss tasted bitter. Dahlia tried to smile, but doubt stirred in the back of her mind. Had she made the right choice? It was too late. The mechanism was in motion. Within weeks, the divorce was finalized, and soon after, Rutledge took over the company. By fall, they were featured in society columns as the newest power couple. You won't regret a thing? Emmett whispered, slipping a massive diamond ring onto her finger. Dahlia nodded and smiled, but Liam's last look still lingered in her mind. The look of a man who had lost not only his freedom but his faith and love. Meanwhile, in a federal prison, Liam marked the days on the wall, vowing revenge. He had 25 years to think. Decades later, in her Park Avenue penthouse, Dahlia Rutledge stood by the window, adjusting her flawless appearance. Her assistant reminded her of the charity gala that evening. The Chanel dress was perfect. The pink diamond necklace glittered under the lights. What's the guest list update? She asked absent-mindedly. The governor confirmed attendance, and Forbes is sending a photographer, her assistant replied. Dahlia grinned. Her status was impeccable, editor-in-chief of a top magazine, trustee of multiple charities, and wife to one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast. She had built a life of prestige and power. Honey, are you ready? Emmett asked from the doorway. He had aged well, still exuding authority and charm. Do you remember that night 25 years ago? The night we started all this? Dahlia shuddered. She had spent years trying to forget Liam's face at the trial. We got everything we wanted, Emmett said smugly. The company has grown tenfold. Have you seen the latest stock prices? She nodded. Liam's former company, now part of the Rutledge empire, was thriving under Emmett's ruthless leadership. And your first husband? Emmett smirked. He's supposed to be released today, isn't he? Dahlia stiffened. She had tried to ignore the date, but it was burned into her memory. February 11th, 2025. He's a nobody, she said, forcing confidence. A broken man who served 25 years. What difference does it make? Emmett studied her carefully. You're right. Just ironic that on the day of his release, we're celebrating the Goldman Sachs takeover. Don't you think? Dahlia turned back to the window, staring at the city below. Her world, built on the ruins of someone else's life. Later, at the Plaza Hotel, the city's financial elite gathered. Dahlia glided through the room, the perfect hostess. Terrific reception, Mrs. Rutledge, an elderly banker toasted. Your husband has pulled off the deal of the century. She smiled. Oh yes, Emmett knows how to get his way. Dahlia remembered his precision in orchestrating everything, from eliminating Frost to framing Liam. Everything had gone according to plan. She posed for the Forbes photographer, her image captured as the epitome of success. Her phone vibrated. A message from her assistant. Turn on the news. In the restroom, Dahlia hid her screen and played the clip. The camera panned to the gates of a federal prison. A tall figure in a dark jacket stepped out. That night I heard a loud conversation. Liam was yelling at Gregory, something about betrayal, about money being missing. Gregory sounded calm at first, but then I heard a crash, like glass breaking. I ran downstairs, but by the time I got to the study, it was too late. Liam was standing over Gregory's body, the gun in his hand. Montgomery read the statement again. Something about it felt rehearsed, too polished, like a script written in advance. He flipped through more pages, stopping at a record of Dahlia's cross-examination during the trial. Prosecutor, Mrs. Davenport, do you believe your husband was capable of murder? Dahlia, I never thought so, but that night, he had so much anger. I was afraid of him. Prosecutor, and you saw the gun in his hand? Dahlia, yes. There was no one else there. It was just the two of them. Montgomery sighed, rubbing his temple. It was just the two of them. That was what had sealed Liam Davenport's fate. A wife's testimony, calm and unwavering, had condemned him to 25 years behind bars. Hardy pulled up a different document. Take a look at this. It was a bank statement from a private offshore account. A deposit had been made a few months after the trial, $2 million. The account was in the name of a shell company, but Hardy had already traced it. This account is connected to Emmett Rutledge. Montgomery exhaled slowly. So, Rutledge was involved back then too. Hardy nodded. It's not proof, but it's enough to know Dahlia's testimony might not have been as honest as it seemed. Montgomery looked back at Dahlia's picture on the board, then at the crime scene photos. So, if Davenport was innocent? He hesitated, his thoughts racing. Hardy finished for him. Then he didn't just serve 25 years for a crime he didn't commit. He served 25 years knowing his wife and Rutledge set him up. Silence hung between them. Montgomery reached for his phone. Find Davenport. Now. Bushwick, Brooklyn, 2:30 a.m. The apartment was empty. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal. The landlord, a wiry man with tired eyes, scratched his head. He left 3 weeks ago. Paid cash. Didn't say where he was going. Hardy scanned the small space. No personal belongings, no photographs. Nothing to indicate where Liam Davenport had gone. It was like he had erased himself. Montgomery stepped into the bedroom, glancing at the closet. A single suit remained inside, a cheap one, the kind an ex-con might buy to start over. On the dresser, a small box sat unopened. Montgomery flipped the lid. Inside was a watch, old but well-kept. The inscription on the back read, "To Liam, time will always bring the truth." Dahlia. Hardy appeared at the doorway. Jasper. She held up a piece of paper she'd found in the trash. It was a map of the city with one location circled in red. The Plaza Hotel. Montgomery and Hardy exchanged glances. He was there, Montgomery murmured. The night she was killed. The Plaza Hotel security room. The grainy footage played on loop. Dahlia Rutledge leaving at 10:15 p.m. alone. But Hardy zoomed in on the corner of the screen. A shadow. A man standing near the valet station. The timestamp read 10:17 p.m. Montgomery leaned forward. The man wore a dark jacket, his face partially obscured. Then, just before he turned away, the light from a street lamp caught his profile. It was Liam Davenport. Montgomery stood up, running a hand over his face. He was watching her. Hardy rewound the footage again, watching the way Davenport lingered. He waited 25 years, she said softly. He wasn't going to rush this. Rutledge Estate, 6 a.m. Emmett Rutledge sat in his study, staring at a half-empty glass of scotch. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands unsteady. The police had questioned him for hours, but he had given them nothing. Now, as the sun rose, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph. Dahlia, young and beautiful, smiling beside him. He had won. He had taken everything from Liam Davenport, his company, his wife, his life. But now Dahlia was dead, and Davenport was out there. The phone rang. Rutledge let it go to voicemail. A few moments later, his assistant knocked hesitantly. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." Rutledge frowned. "Who?" The assistant swallowed. "He says his name is Liam Davenport." The blood drained from Rutledge's face. The room was quiet except for the rustling of papers. Hardy slid another document across the table. "Now watch this. Look at the timestamps." Montgomery leaned in. It was Dahlia Rutledge's statement from the night of the murder. "Money. I was in the next room and clearly heard the threats." Montgomery's gaze sharpened. He flipped to another page. This was her testimony in court, given 3 months later. "I saw Liam leaving Frost's office with a gun in his hand." Montgomery exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers on the desk. Where did the gun come from? And why the change in testimony? Hardy placed a new document beside it, an old blueprint of the building where the murder happened. She traced her finger across the layout. "Here's Frost's office in the far wing." She moved her hand. "And here's the room where Dahlia claims she was." Montgomery frowned. Between the two locations, there were 2 corridors and a long hallway. "It was physically impossible for her to hear that conversation," Hardy said. Montgomery's jaw tightened. A witness changing their story was one thing, but a witness claiming to hear something that was impossible? That was a red flag. They were buried in old files, the musty scent of aged paper filling the air. Montgomery flipped through another folder, company financials. Frost launched an internal investigation a month before he was killed. Hardy glanced up. An investigation into what? Montgomery ran his finger along the text. He requested an audit of all major transactions. He scanned further. But there's no report on the results. Hardy leaned over. So what did he find? Montgomery's expression darkened. "We don't know. The results aren't in the file." "But there is something else," Hardy muttered, flipping to the next page. Her eyes widened. A week after Frost was murdered, the controlling interest in his company was transferred to the Rutledge Corporation. Silence stretched between them. Montgomery closed the file, his mind racing. If Frost suspected something, then he was a threat. But not to Davenport. Hardy nodded. For someone else. They kept working late into the evening, the puzzle becoming more tangled with every piece they uncovered. Finally, Hardy pulled out another file. "Here's the ballistics report." She passed it to Montgomery. He opened it and read the first few lines. Then he looked up. The gun was found in Davenport's office. Hardy let out a slow breath. "Planted." Montgomery nodded. Everything they thought they knew about that night was unraveling. And the truth was still out there. Montgomery leaned back in his chair, staring at the board of photos, files, and scattered notes. The pieces of the past were rearranging themselves, forming a picture far more sinister than the one painted 25 years ago. Dahlia Rutledge had built a life on a foundation of secrets, and now those secrets had caught up to her. The message left at the crime scene, "Retribution is a dish served cold," wasn't just a warning. It was a reckoning. Hardy rubbed her temples. "We're not just chasing a killer, Jasper. We're unearthing something bigger." Montgomery exhaled. "We need to find Liam Davenport." His voice was steady, but there was something in his eyes, an understanding that this case was far from over. Hardy shut the last file and glanced at the clock. It was late. Too late for answers, too early for closure. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious. But in that small office, with old files spread across the desk and the weight of a decades-old crime pressing down on them, the detectives knew one thing for sure. Justice delayed wasn't always justice denied. And someone had finally come to collect.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more